Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by my guy Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. And we are looking at a little Tuesday night slate here, Nate, in the NBA. Just 4 games to choose from. In this one, we're going to be talking about that marquee matchup. The Dubs are in Phoenix taking on the Suns, two of the best teams in the West and the league to be expected this season. Do make sure to like and subscribe to that page. As I said, we're bringing you game videos each and every weekday of this regular season. Also bringing you our player props video that we have for you, staying hot to start this season as well there. Make sure you head to thelines.com as well. That's where we have all of our great written content for you guys all season long, as well as our great odds finder tool where you can go ahead and make sure you are shopping those NBA lines and player props to the best of your ability across those U.S. sportsbooks. Nate, let's get into that little 4-game slate we have tonight in the NBA.
Yeah, aside from that game you just mentioned, we got Pistons +5 at Wiz. We got the Mavericks -3.5 at the Pelicans. Some injury news to watch there. We will break that game for you in a separate video. And then the Clippers are -10 at Oklahoma City facing the Thunder. This game, Warriors open +3, picked up a little bit of steam, and it's +2.5 as we record here. And the total at 224.5. I mean, it's intriguing to try to take the over here, the way the Warriors have been playing thus far this season. I think we need a little bit more of a sample size with the Suns to know what kind of pace they're going to play at a nightly basis, though they've really been slowing it down. They have yet to go over, even though they went into overtime with the Blazers in their second game here. But for me, I lean towards the Warriors, who haven't been playing their best ball, but it's been a lot of mental lapses, as you often see with them with the turnovers. Not necessarily having the urgency as they come off a championship. A little bit of a hangover there. But last year, you saw with this team that they turned a corner against the Suns, December 3rd, and they beat them soundly. Then they beat them again, and they lost on March 30th without Curry. Jordan Poole still went off for 38, 9, and 7 with the shorthanded supporting cast around him. So the Suns, they might be favored right now because of how they just shut down the Clippers, but that's a team that's really struggling to figure things out in terms of rotation, in terms of fit, and ball movement to get threes. And the Suns are kind of a pack-it-in team that sells out. Doesn't necessarily guard the three-point line that well, but depends on variance, depends on guys not hitting those shots, but that's not going to work with the Warriors. And I do think CP3 is aging at this point. They're not going to be as ridiculously clutch as they were last year. It's a lot of Ayton and Booker, and Ayton, has to deal with Draymond now in this matchup. I would be a little concerned about him putting up big numbers. It's just a situation where I think I lean, when you get the champs at +120 here in a game that has their attention, I lean towards Golden State, because I think when they come to play and when they concentrate, that they should be favored, of course.
It feels like you're really saying that game against Denver was a lack of concentration. I mean, 3 games into the season, we don't have enough to go on to make any serious, proclamations here, right? Like, one game where they just got their asses handed to them for like 2 straight quarters against the Nugs, and they only lost by 5, but they were getting pounding for the end from the second quarter into most of the third until getting it closer. So all of that skews all the statistics. It's kind of what I was talking about in the Monday video as well, where you one bad game, anything like that. I mean, you look at Dallas right now; they're like a +65 net rating through like if you look at like a couple of different quarters over the court. Like, so it's all just a little bit silly right now. But what I do see for the Dubs that scares me, that I think you can take some sort of a little bit of not even with a grain of salt. You can take these stats and say this might be indicative of what's going to happen to them moving forward, is the struggles that Clay and Jordan Poole are having. I don't know. Jordan Poole just got $140 million, and I was kind of like, if anything, it seemed like the playoffs detracted from the money he was going to make. He was so hit or miss. He only got like 10 to 15 minutes a game in the finals because they couldn't trust him beyond, just being a random spark, not knowing if he was going to turn the ball over. Right now, he's a streaky shooter. Watching a couple of their games, it's not looking good. Steph, as we also talked about, is on a mission clearly after playing so poorly for most of last season and shooting below what his numbers are, which is why this year he's at 33, 5, and 4 in 33 minutes a game so far, shooting better than 5 for 12 from deep right now, which is just classic Steph. 5 for 12 is like what you look for from peak Steph. And if he's that 44% from three this year, that's great for them. Wiggs is Wiggs. I think Wiggins has shown he's going to be that player. But my main point here is the struggles that we saw at times from Clay and Poole in the playoffs seem to me to be the indication of what's going to happen this year. That's what's going on already. Poole with those shooting splits at 38% from the field, awful. 31 from deep, very bad for someone you need to be scoring from three, going 1 for 5 a game from there. Clay's 14 points a game in 23 minutes is pretty good from an efficiency standpoint, but his splits are also pretty bad. I mean, 38% or 34% from three for him is pretty good, but he's only getting those 23 minutes. That's reason for concern. They need his defense or the equivalent of it. If he's not on the floor, Wiggs is guarding bigger guys. It's going to be trouble for them. Wiseman's not someone that you trust. So my main point here is the way that they're turning the ball over, which is at an insane rate, giving up points off of turnovers, all this stuff is playing right into the hands of a Phoenix Suns team who is kind of just going about their business and just getting shit done. I know they lost to the Blazers. I think we both like the Blazers more than some of the numbers might be predicting for them right now. So not too big of a issue there for me for the Suns. I see them as a team right now that's coming out and playing a lot more just in their nature and sort of knows what they're about, has a very clear identity still, and is making mental errors and beating themselves. The last thing I would say is you mentioned the fourth quarter, and that's also where the Dubs are getting murdered right now is that fourth quarter. They have a minus 14 something net rating in the fourth quarter. Unshockingly, the Suns' 9th best net rating in the fourth quarter, and still some really good clutch time numbers. Obviously, it's not going to be as historic as it was for them in terms of clutch time numbers last season, but they're still in the top 10 in really all necessary, really crucial categories. Like I said, in that fourth quarter, whereas the Dubs have the fourth worst at minus 20, just to be very specific about what that is. So, look, the quarters where Steph is playing most of the quarter, which is the first and the third, they're had the best net rating of any of the quarters. In the second and fourth, where he's only playing about 6 minutes, 7 minutes each quarter, that their net rating goes plummeting. So it's clear that right now they're relying too much on him, and the Suns are just like a grinded out team that I think is ripe for a nice victory at home in this one.
How crazy is it that they're 20th in scoring right now, Phoenix, and they're getting 110 points per game? I mean, that's the modern NBA though. So I mean, 224 is not necessarily that high in this modern NBA. We just saw some scores here tonight. I mean, like Brooklyn and Memphis that went to 270. Both these teams can defend a little better than that, but when you have Steph Curry playing the way he has, I mean, what are his numbers through 3 games here? He hasn't missed at the free throw line, hitting 5.5 threes at 44%. He can bend a defense on his own and then get those other guys going. Unfortunately, no Dante DiVincenzo, because you would like to see those slashers playing off Steph against the Suns defense. But Golden State, besides the threes, they're second in 2-point shooting right now, 57%. Third most free throw attempts, which would help you slow it down and get to the over. Sure. I've kind of leaned towards that happening. That would saying we haven't seen the Suns have to come out of their shell defensively enough yet to really know whether a team can light them up for 120, and whether we can get them out of their shell offensively because the other team is playing with enough pace and scoring.
Yeah,
they haven't historically gone over these teams in their recent meetings, but I'm kind of intrigued by that. See if it maybe creeps down, or if you could tease it. I think the Warriors aren't going to lose by 6.5 or 7 here. Although, we have seen plenty of blowouts here early in the season. I think it's preach some caution here. This is an intriguing matchup, but let's see how they start to unfold here in the opening weeks.
Yeah, I think you're right on about that. I think there's some areas that you can still get some value. I do like the Suns in this game, like a pretty good amount. watch the defending champs completely surprise me. But that would be my prediction. I know you like the over, and that's where I would lean if I was going to bet the total. Like you said, I'd still sprinkle just a few units on it. To sort of contradict what you said a bit, they did play the Blazers the other day. They lost by 2, but they only gave up 106 or so points to the Blazers in that loss, despite Dame having 40 plus.
Yeah.
113. Yeah. So, 113, if they win and they give up 113 or just barely lose, you could still see that going potentially over, but that's right at where you want, right? So even with Dame's 40 plus, I could still see that. I would, like you said, caution with that total. I feel good about the way Phoenix is playing right now. That's why I feel pretty strongly about that bet. And despite what could happen with Steph, whose prop is at 26.5, and with 4 games to choose from, you might be seeing that one in our player props video. In this one, we're going to be taking a look at a pretty good matchup depending on who's playing in it. We've got the Mavs in New Orleans taking on those Pellies. -3.5 for the Mavs. I'll just say real quick, I know we're going to go through the lines here, but it is very interesting, as I said, with Zion and BI both questionable right now, that they are almost 4-point favorites in it. So we'll get into all things that. Want to make sure you do like and subscribe to that page. Continue to follow along with us. Check out all these game videos we're bringing you each and every weekday. Also have our great player props video, already started very hot on the season as we ended it, and spent most of last season pretty hot on these player props, hitting at a really nice clip. So make sure to check those out moving forward. Also want you to head to thelines.com. That's where we have our great written content for you guys all season long, and our odds finder tool where you can go ahead and make sure you're shopping NBA lines to the best of your ability across U.S. sports books all season long. Nate, let's go ahead and get into that little 4-game slate in the NBA on Tuesday night.
Yeah, aside from this Mavs game, we got Wizards -5 at home against Detroit. We got the Pelicans. Of course, this game we're talking about are +3.5 right now at home against the Mavs. Thunder +10 at home against the Clippers. And then the other game we break down is Suns -2.5 in Phoenix against the champs, the Warriors. Separate video up about that one. Yeah, this is going to really depend on the injury news we get, whether Zion's going to play after suffering a hip pointer there on Sunday, and Brandon Ingram suffered a concussion. Trey Murphy stepped in, played really well there as they fell to Utah in overtime. Herb Jones is also questionable for this one. So really, you could argue certainly 3 of the 5 starters for the Pelicans, extremely important guys here. And even if they were at full strength, I'm kind of leaning towards the Mavericks. I mean, I hope that the spread doesn't increase too much if those guys are out, because I don't know if it really matters that much in terms of, I think the Pelicans will still be competitive. I don't see them getting blown out at home without Zion and or Ingram. But the Mavs just grinding out wins per usual. But they haven't really had to play much this year. 2 games thus far, one of the few teams that have that extra rest here early in the season. In those games, they're number 2 in both defensive efficiency and offensive efficiency. Their only blip being that they gave it up late to the Suns in a game that we thought on the opener the Suns would come out guns blazing, and they struggled at first, but then they did eventually exact that revenge against Dallas, and then the Mavs turn around and just stomp out a really good Memphis Grizzlies team. So it's working right now with Christian Wood added to the fold. I don't know why people looked at the Mavs and said, what did they do this offseason? They didn't do anything. Maybe it's because that was the first move of the offseason, really, before like anything had settled. It's like, well, they got a potentially fantastic pick and roll partner for Luka. And yeah, he's 25 points in both games. Got to the free throw line 14 times against Memphis and was a +22 in that game. Huge difference maker. But I think the biggest difference in this particular matchup is the 3-point discrepancy. Like, the Pelicans are the worst 3-point shooting team in the league. They take the fewest. They're all interior, number 1 offensive rebounding rate, 4th in free throws. Well, the Mavs keep you off the line, and they're also number 1 in defensive rebounding so far. You want a bigger sample size. Last year, they allowed the 4th fewest offensive rebounds. And as these guys play more alongside Luka, these guys being the wings, mostly Bullock and DFS, they're just going to get more and more comfortable. And right now, they're second in 3-point percentage early in the season here. Luka in this matchup, in his last 5 against the Pels, 31 points per game, 8.5 boards, 8.5 assists. He had 49 points in the last one. The Mavs as a team hitting 15 threes at 40% in their last 5. They've won 4 of those against the Pelicans. So, and then, lastly, you just look at the trends here. When they're favored, the Mavs went 43-11 last year, 16-4 on the road. And then the Pels as home dogs, 9-20, and 3-10 when they had that rest disadvantage, which they certainly do here, since Dallas, again, has only played 2 games.
Man, I mean, that was a lot of really solid stats that really back up everything you said. I'm very proud of you. I agree with everything you said as well. To be honest, I'm looking for stuff to add, but it's like all the angles that I would look at for here. How did they do last season? Because now we're talking, if they don't have Ingram and Zion, my initial reaction is like, all right, well, we're stars out. Maybe, bets up a little bit. The Ewing theory, right? Like these guys come out and now we've got a bunch of guys behind the 2 stars that were like, well, they could just come out and play better a la Memphis the way they did last year without Ja. Having both those guys out sucks. That's a big deal. If Herb Jones is out as well, now you're definitely talking about the guy that was picking up Luka, probably right at half court, right? If not a bit over it, and expending all his energy there. So that's a huge loss as well. It's very tough for me to see them able to hang with Dallas if they don't have those guys. If this total's at 225.5 also, I might consider a nice little under on that, parlayed with like maybe the Mavs money line and just kind of get over the need for them to win by a certain amount. Let's say that the Pellies come out and really surprise us with, some of the younger guys that are going to be getting minutes in this case. I would still like the Mavs to pull out the victory, which is why I might feel a little bit better, obviously, about that. But you're totally right on about Christian Wood, and I'm really glad you said it because we mentioned it definitely a bunch in our preseason videos, and it's already proving true that he's a perfect addition for them. I mean, they already have defense across the board. They're not going to be asking him to do that much outside of rebound, which he has done already. But like I said, the key thing here to be a little bit cautious of it, it's before we talk about who should you bet on. Obviously, we like the Mavs, especially without those 2 guys in. But if those 2 guys are in, or one of them is in, how does that impact this game? With Zion in, we're talking probably like the attempt for New Orleans to pick that pace up and really, attack and just have him in transition. Because there's plenty of guys behind them that are going to be capable guys like Trey Murphy, as you mentioned. Jose Alvarado will get a bit more time, Larry Nance, and then, maybe you have Jonas on the floor for a bit more, Joval for a bit more time there as well to really, hopefully negate a bit of what Christian Wood doing and force them to have a guy like JaVale on the floor a bit more. So all that said, like I do, depending on what happens, I guess what I'm saying is if those 2 guys are not on, I do like a parlay of a nice money line Mavs and the under bet on this one because 225 or so feels high in a Mavs team that is going to play at a pace below 100 in this game, probably closer to like 96 if they have their way. And they're continuing to be as good a defense as they've been since J Kidd got there, where they know that they've got a guy who, it's almost like they're following the modern NBA roster structure, which is have a ton of big guys that can guard and shoot the 3, and then you throw in one of the best offensive players of this generation in Luka Doncic. And I feel really, really good about what this team can do this season and the fact that they should be able to take care of a Pelicans team without its 2 best players.
If Zion's in, though, I think we got to like the over, right? I mean, you look at the difference.
What changes it? Yeah.
In how the Pelicans play. I mean, so far this season with him, at least in at least part of the game, they score in at least 122. And it's not that different between Zion and CJ in terms of if they have one of those guys, they're getting about 116 a game. The difference is the pace, though. It's 97 with just CJ. It's 100.7 with Zion. He kind of takes on more of that point guard role, and then pushing the issue. And the Mavs, they were especially slow at home. I mean, it was ridiculously slow how often they went under when they were at home. But it's a little harder to dictate that pace when you're on the road. And I would be a little concerned about their ridiculous efficiency this far. I mean, the second in offensive rating in these 2 games here. They're shooting 50%. I mean, they shot 50% against Memphis, 43% from the 3-point line. Got to the line 36 times as a team. I mean, that's incredible right there.
That's how you do it.
Yeah, that to put up 137 on Memphis. So, and I don't know. I mean, it's going to depend who's in the lineup, like we said here. But I think if you get either Zion or Bi in there, I would lean over. But really, yeah, I think the Mavs are going to continue to do what they did last year, all the way to the West Conference Finals, and it's kind of an early statement here against a Pelicans team that's jumping up. I would expect Zion to try to play. I mean, a concussion is a little harder to just get cleared through, but Zion's dealing with a hip bruise, and I think he'll be out there. We'll just see how effective he is, and whether he can stay competent defensively is the biggest question, right? Because when you get put into a million pick and rolls with Luka, and you're not a great pick and roll defender in the first place, there's going to be a lot of good looks for Dallas, I think.
Agreed. Yeah, that on both sides of the ball, Zion means more points for sure. So that's something to look out for. I think, I don't know what the deal is with those two guys playing. I don't want to try to predict it. I just know that if I'm able to, I'm going to be Hawkeyeing it. And as soon as I see an actual definitive report on on the two of them or one of them, bet accordingly to how we said. If both of them are out, immediately hitting that money line and Mavs money line in the under. Zion plays, might see what that does to the total. If it stays at about 224, I'd feel pretty good about it. If both of them play, yeah, I don't know. Now I'm at a bit more of a loss, to be honest with you. I like the angle of one or both of them not playing, obviously, for the Mavs in this early season. So, Nate, let's get into our first of these player props for tonight's little Tuesday night slate here.
Yeah, Chris Paul hasn't really been looking to score through the first 3 games here for the Suns, but that should change here in a matchup with the Warriors. We'll see what happens in terms of the pace here. Pretty much opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of the Warriors playing real fast, Suns slowing it down. Suns are in their first of 6 home games here, and it's obviously a big one against the champs. CP3 generally comes to play in this matchup, though, since he joined the Suns, averaging 15.7 points, to go along with 7.5 assists. Against Golden State, the usage has averaged out to 22%, but he's had big spikes when he has to score, 27%, 37% in a couple of those games. So I think Andrew Wiggins will be draped on Booker here throughout the game. Wiggins has kind of morphed into a shutdown force for the Warriors. He has the best defensive rating on the team right now. So I'm kind of interested in the Booker under 26.5 points or 36.5 PRA. And the CP3 over is pretty low for, I think, points and assists is what you go with here because he's, a double-digit assist threat right now. 22.5 is the number for that combined. You can get 13.5 points at plus odds. You can get 12.5 points at minus 120 FanDuel. I mean, he averages 11.5 assists at home since the start of January, along with 14.5 points. So definitely not outlandish here. Like I said, this season only 7.7 points in 3 games where they just didn't necessarily need his scoring or the matchup wasn't there for him to be so assertive. But the Warriors are playing real shoddy defense, Josh. I mean, especially that second unit is just terrible. I don't know if CP3 is going to stagger and get some minutes against the second unit, but the point is, yeah, he'll get to work on Steph or Clay while Booker has to deal with Wiggins. So definitely double-digit points and assists is a possibility. The double-doubles plus 185 and the double-double in a win, which I think you like the Suns to win at home here, plus 300. Don't hate those in terms of getting some extra juice.
Yeah, I don't hate any of that. Man, if he played with the second unit, that'd be sick. Because I was talking about in the game video for the Dubs that second unit is bad on defense right now, and Wiggs isn't on that second unit. A lot of what we saw last year was Wiggins and Poole with Clay coming in as well on a second unit that was like, well, damn, this is almost as good as our first. It just doesn't have Steph or Draymond. But that's just not the case right now. And so that would be wildly interesting. Either way, I was going to hit Chris Paul as well. We didn't even talk about this before we started recording. I was going to hit his points and assists as well. I think it's 13.5 is way down for him in the points column, even though, like you said, he has not been scoring at all this season. This doesn't seem like the game that he's going to sit out and watch idly by as they potentially lose, because he only shot the ball like 8 times against the Blazers and they lost that game. And it was kind of like, hey, dude, like we could use you to score too with that mid-range jumper, not just get 11 assists a game. So I think that's he's going to realize that tonight against a team that's, like you said, awful defensively right now, but playing at 110 pace with like 125 offensive rating, you got to put up points to hang with the Dubs, even if you're better on defense than the teams they've played so far. So we're going to move on to a guy I'm really happy to talk about, Mr. Christian Wood on the Mavs. We talked about liking him. I feel like there was some split thought behind him being on the Mavs this season before he started playing with them. And, you called it. He kind of came to the team really early on in the transaction process and the free agent signings and trades and all that. So, I think he was kind of forgotten. But in his first two with Dallas, he's already at 25 points a game and 10 boards, and he's barely playing, dude. He's playing like 24 and a half minutes a game with those numbers. So he's scoring a point a minute. Talk about efficiency. 10 boards, 1 rebound every 2 minutes. Absolutely incredible. His usage rate while he's on the court is 35%. So his points and rebounds prop, I didn't even tell you guys, is 25 and a half, which I really like, going over on that for pretty much even money on FanDuel right now. At minus 102, the points themselves at 17 and a half are even money. So you just get, that's plus 100 right there. Like I was saying, first two with Dallas, absolutely incredible. He also plays really well against New Orleans. Who's not good on defense once again. And we talked about in the game video, if Zion plays, we do like the over in this one. Just as long as he plays, we like the over. If he doesn't play, feeling a lot better about that under. And if BI also doesn't play, definitely feeling good about that under. But they are really bad on defense regardless. And we know that the Mavs are going to slow things down and control the offense and still have the ball for a long time in this game. In 6 games versus New Orleans, when he was with Houston for Christian Wood, we're talking 19 points a game, 10 boards, and 31 minutes, right? He still hasn't even gotten 31 minutes this season. So I think he creates a huge matchup problem for them. I'll give you one more here. He and Luka, wonderful tandem when they're both on the floor in a 2-man lineup. If you want to go ahead and check that out on advanced stats, we're talking 148 offensive rating, but with the two of them on the floor. So what else do you really want to know about how perfect of a sidekick Luka finally has in Mr. Christian Wood?
Yeah, that's why I don't get why people were saying the Mavs are going to be worse this year when they add such a dynamic pick and roll partner. And yeah, you pointed out the usage rate. It's so consistent what Dallas is going to do, right? It's call up Christian Wood if he's on the floor with Luka, and we're going to run pick and roll and spread you out and shoot threes. And Nola's not good at defending either of those things, the 3-point line or in the paint. Joe Val, you might be forced into playing big minutes here if Zion's not good to go. If Zion is good to go, I mean, he's going to be a little more tentative than usual, and he's not a great defender anyway. So I think, yeah, Wood should have no problem getting around 20 points again. And then, yeah, there's barely any rebounds needed for a big man to get over that mark. Maybe you'll even see a few more minutes since Dallas has, because of this matchup, they could use him out there. I am going to take an under here. I know it's a little scary, and frankly, in the NBA, it's easier when you have this many options to just keep taking overs to identify the ones you want. But if you are feeling spicy here, Cade Cunningham under 31.5 points, rebounds, assists against Washington, which he hasn't reached yet this year. I mean, he's been right on it with 30, 29 in terms of his combined stats. And really, I mean, but the home road splits I'm looking at here, Detroit on the road here, and in his career, Cade averaging 2.7 fewer points, 16, and 1.4 fewer assists, 4.9, on the road with a slightly lower usage rate. Now playing alongside Jaden Ivey takes a little bit of the ball handling responsibilities away from him. And it's just Washington's early season defense, which, if you guys recall, was lights out in the first month last year, too. I mean, just number 1 3-point D. This year, they're sagging in more and not giving you anything easy. Number 2 in paint points, number 3 in assists, and number 3 in field goal percentage allowed. So I don't think the assists are really going to be there for Cade in terms of getting in there. And, I mean, I think Washington will be able to identify the shooter. It's not plural shooters. It's just Bojan on Detroit. So I don't think that'll be an easy assist either. Washington's not giving up a ton of rebounds. They play at a relatively slow pace. So 19.5 points straight up is intriguing as well. But I could see Cade getting 20 points, but not getting the peripheral stats to get you over this total for PRA.
Yeah, I think that's what you're going to have to bank on, dude, because like Cade is he's a ball handler. He's a guy who's able to lead an offense, so he'll have the ball in his hands plenty. And I think, I actually watched a bit of their last game where he really needed to kind of come in and score for them to hang around. And like he did, right? He didn't really show up in the first half. He was more looking to dime. But I think once you start putting, the onus on him to score, which I think he feels this season, he's probably their second best 3-point shooter, at least on that starting lineup. So I do see the ability for him to score, but you're probably a little bit more right on in terms of the peripheral stats not being quite as prevalent for him in a game that I think that Washington's D is pretty legit. They've sold out for 3-and-D and scoring threes, and they're pretty good so far. So let's finish things off here with Andrew Wiggins, Wiggy, since there's really no more Iggy on the Warriors. He is on the team, but he's not really playing. So we can give Wiggy the names to Wiggins. 22.5 points and rebounds. Look, the dude picked up basically where he left off in the playoffs, and they're still trusting him just as much as they did in the playoffs. And he's probably their second best player right now, as he was for the entirety of that playoffs, mostly because, look, he's not their most talented offensive player, although he can score in a variety of ways, more so than the other guards that you obviously think of in Clay and Jordan Poole. But at the same time, his defense keeps him on the floor. And that's something we were talking about is he's got to guard Booker. He's going to be guarding Booker. Booker's going to get 39 to 40 minutes. Wiggs is going to get 39 to 40 minutes. He's going to be on the floor as soon as Booker is. So, with that in mind, I think you love the fact that he's going to continue to get the usage. I would take the points and boards. I would take the points at 16.5 at -110. I think I would rather have that just because of the better odds than the rebounds and points, which gets you -120. So, but in 3 games this year so far, we know what he's done: 22.5 points, about 6.5 boards, and it's his shooting, 52% from the field, man. That's so great to see when you see that for him. And that's going to lead to him being able to do more. They will have to sag off of him a little bit finally because he's shooting well enough from deep to be able to, earn that respect and get a little bit of room for himself to use his athleticism and get to the rim. Wild stat that you were able to provide for me: double-digit scoring in all 25 career games that he's played versus the Suns. That's a lot. That's a lot of games to always have double digits, and especially when he's been on some bad teams in the past and you've seen him have some sort of slink away games. It just hasn't happened. So his last 10 versus them, almost 21 points a game versus the Suns and 5 boards. So there you go right there with your prop, easily over 20. And I just think that he's too important to this team to not get the minutes. And the way that he's playing on offense, man, that 52% field goal percentage for someone who's really getting the ball predominantly out on the wing and in space is very, very impressive.
Yeah, and the minutes follow rebounds, and so far in 3 games, he's got a 10.7% rebounding rate, which is, his career is 7%. It's way up from last year, and it's what we saw in the playoffs. Like you said, I think he had a couple 15 board games in those playoffs because he was out there guarding Luka and just out there getting tons of minutes. He's also been their best individual defender, 106 defensive rating. Draymond has not been that. He's 111. The team is at 110. So yeah, he's going to guard Book. He's going to be scoring because Clay is yet to find a true rhythm here. And he's basically averaging 22.5 points through 3 games. And for a guy who's then grabbing a tenth of his team's total rebounds, I think combining the two of them is easy money. That's why it's -120.
Yep. Yeah, and it's interesting. He's a different style of player than they've had being their second option for a long time, right? It was either Kevin Durant or Klay Thompson coming off screens for Klay, running around. Wiggs is doing a lot less of that. He's getting the ball in space, going one-on-one because they know they can't double him out there. And I think he'll continue to get it. Like that, you said that usage rate near 23% for them. That's great. That's Klay Thompson numbers. And so he's going to be in that second scoring role for them for this whole season, I'm pretty sure. So that is all the time we have for you guys. We're going to look to continue to stay about 70%, 72% so far on the early
4-0 last night.
And 4-0 last night, baby. So we're continuing to stay hot. Look, I mean, it's not going to be the entire season. Definitely want to stay with us for the next 2 to 3 weeks. We're going to stay on this track, I think. But then we're going to look to stay closer, 55, 60%. We're still going to be bearing winners all season with these props, baby. So make sure to like and subscribe. Continue to follow along with us. We will be back with you guys on a pretty nice Wednesday night slate here in the NBA tomorrow. So until we see you next, happy betting.